Okay, hey guys, just a wild one-off right here. Maybe there'll be a few more of these in the future, but I am currently sitting at Plat 1, the highest rank in Master Duels, with a 14 win streak using Numerons. So we're just going to kind of go over the deck profile real quick, maybe do a replay, maybe some sample hands, whatever. This is the list I actually played. I do have some slight suggestions because as you can see I'm out of materials, so it couldn't quite make all of the things that I wanted. But I had just about everything that I needed. So, yeah, Numeron Wall, obviously part of the Numeron package. If you've ever seen this card before, it's like an obvious include. If you haven't, it's a pseudo battle fader. It dodges Ash and can search your field spell straight to the field. It doesn't go to your hand, so they can't Ash it. And the catch is that you have to control no cards. This is a constant theme in this deck. There's going to be the drawback of not wanting to have monsters and not wanting to have cards on our field. The way this deck wins is getting the field spell, so this is extremely important. If we don't get the field spell, we're going to have a rough time. And as you can see, I did get a royal finish of it, so very happy with that. 3 Maxx Cs, 3 Ashes, and then 3 Skullmeisters. This is the hand trap package that I settled on. I tried out a couple things like Drolls and Ogres, and I'll be honest, for the current meta, Skullmeister is really good, and the big thing is he's not once per turn, so if you draw 2 of them, like, it's great. You can stop all kinds of shenanigans. But yeah, I don't know, Skullmeister was just a good include. I actually put this card in first when I was testing an Allure package, but I couldn't quite find all the darks I wanted to include to actually, like, run that. I was looking at, like, Radiant Kaijus and stuff, but this is what we settled on. I think these are the best traps, hand traps generally for going second. So this is the 9 that we play. You're gonna see an Honest here. I was playing this. I think I maybe used it once. It does kind of work because these guys are light and the kaiju is light, but I wanted to run 2 limiter removals, okay, and I would highly recommend you just run 2 limiter removals. It's just better. Unfortunately, I did not have the materials to craft it, so we settled with an Honest because I pulled it. Then we have 3 Planet Pathfinders. I'd love to find a world where we could cut this card down a little bit lower. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot of options right now with Terraforming at 1 for searching field spells, even though we have all these. If there was a little bit more draw that we could realistically include in this deck, maybe we could cut it down. It did come up that it was good to have more of them too in one game, because I believe I was playing Trap Tricks, and they tried to negate it with Sarah, I think it was, or something, or some card where if you send one of the same name to the graveyard, then you can negate the effect. So because I just had more in my deck, they couldn't negate it, so that was cool. Obviously, them negating this with an Ash or something is really bad for you, but you really need the redundancy. You just need it. Then we move on to our Kaijus. Again, I was testing with some other ones. Kaijus are basically auto wins as long as they have a monster and you have field spell. It almost always will just win you the game. And this is our out to things like Drytrons, or one of our outs to things like Drytrons. Gameciel is the best one because he has the lowest attack, so we can swing into it the most, but it's still not under the magic number of 2k, which allows us to get 2 swings and generate lethal damage in most scenarios off of our Numerons. Then we have Jizukiru, and the reason I've picked this one as my second one, even though it can be big and this can be a drawback, is that it can be limiter removal, obviously, is one thing, and we can summon it as our additional summon instead of an extract monster if our opponent has a kaiju, so if we double draw kaijus. And so we can do that. This works better with 2 removals or 3 removals as well, because 2 removals plus a Jizukiru swinging over another kaiju is also enough lethal damage to kill your opponent. It'll go 66 and then 12k or whatever the fuck, and that'll kill them. So yeah, I don't know. This could be anything else, though. I would even recommend maybe trying to squeeze more kaijus in. 6th or 7th would be awesome. Like, these things just win you the game, just tossing them on your opponent's board. And even though it's big, it usually won't matter, because usually you're going second, and it's fine. Again, if you can find a way to play around with the Allure package, you can play around with things like DD Crow Radians. That's what I was trying to do, but it just wasn't really worth it in the end, so I didn't run that. I have a Feather Duster. This is mostly just for dealing with Eldritch. Same with the Twin Twisters, just for dealing with Eldritch. Sometimes it comes up, sometimes you want the quick play response, so I just have the 1-of copy. If they start special summoning, you can draw a fair bit into your deck sometimes, so just having like 1-of outs is kind of useful on occasion. They almost never were not helpful, so to speak, and having extra pitch fodder in this deck like is fine. If like a couple of cards in your hand are brick, it doesn't matter because you 1-card OTK them anyways. To that end, more draw. I tossed in a Desires. Again, don't really know if I'd like to run more of this or not. Running the Desires does force you to run 3 of these instead of 2, and there is a world where you banish all 3 of them, or like 2 of them, and then things can go south. But this card helped more often than not, so you can play around with more copies of that. But I was running 1 and it was fine. It was good when it came up. 1-for-1 obviously lets us get our Numeron Wall, so it's just an extra terraforming, albeit a bad one. Not ideal, but you do what you gotta do to get the field spell because that wins us the game, right? Cards that win you the game are usually pretty good. Then we have the field spell itself, right? Just to summon our Numerons. 3 droplets, again for going second. If we pitch a monster against Drytrons, they can't do shit. And obviously it just helps us clear monsters off of our board or other cards that are stuck there. And clearing cards that are stuck on your board is something that is very important to this deck, being able to Numeron Wall into a field spell. Then we have Imperms, again, the 3 hand traps here, so technically running 12 hand traps with the other ones that are actually monsters. But this one can be set and obviously has its other niche uses. And then we have a Reboot, and Reboot is, of course, just an obscenely broken card. If this card was at more than 1, I would play more than 1, and every time I draw it, it just feels a little gross inside, especially when it wins you the game, because it just negates any ability for your opponent to use traps against you going second, and that's just absurd. Obviously, if they have like a, I guess like a double judgment or something, like I guess they can stop it, but it hasn't come up. That's just too niche. So yeah, this card is just like a kind of must-have include, really good. And again, if they like get Maxx C and they draw you a bunch of cards, you're gonna have a bunch of these 1-ofs to just kind of like get all your shit together. And then yeah, again, Numeron Calling, we just need it because it gets dumped off the field spell. I think I skipped over this. 3 copies because we played Desires, otherwise most lists will play 2 copies. You could again swap these out for like a Kaiju and another limiter removal or something. And you know, even if you're not playing the Jizukiru, if you're playing like a different Kaiju instead, limiter removal is still highly recommended. And the reason that limiter removal is good is because it allows us to lethal our opponent if they don't play monsters. There's not a lot of things I can think of that give your opponent monsters, and you don't want to run something like Kaiju Slumber, which still requires one of you to play a monster first for you to slumber. I don't think you can slumber a blank board. But the problem with Slumber is that it puts a Kaiju on your field before you cast your network ability, which requires you to have no monsters. So, not ideal. As far as the extract goes, we have 2 of each of the Numeron gates, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we have 2 copies of C1. You only really need 1. Most games you're not going to make it anyways, but because you're going to kill your opponent. Honestly, most of the extract cards other than numbers 1 through 4, which you need 2 copies of, are not that important. You could even run a third set of these guys, or at least 3 of them, so that if you get forced to go first, you can make like a Megaclops or something. But I like having the options of picking between my like Link 4s, and there are some good options, so yeah, I think just having the 2 casts is fine. Like most games, that's like enough. Either you've won or you've lost at that point. So as far as the 4 options go, we have a Megaclops, which takes 3 monsters, so if they pop 1, we can still make this. It's a 4K beater that's unaffected by monsters, except Xyz. So this card is just really good. It also has like a slight recursion effect that I believe I've never gotten to use. Then we have an Avramax. This card is really hard for some decks to break over because it gains the attack of special summon monsters that it battles. It has like a spin back effect if it gets sent to the graveyard somehow, and it's just overall very large. So this one is a great go-to. We have Apollousa. Apollousa is really good for like if you need to get the negates, like if you really need them to protect yourself. The problem is sometimes it can be hard to clear Apollousa off the board, and she loses attack, which makes it kind of hard to kill your opponent sometimes. So you got to be careful going into Apollousa. Then we have the Underworld Goddess to, again, out things. You use your 4 monsters plus one of your opponent's monsters to summon it. The problem is that even with the protections that this card does have, and the negate effect that it does have, sometimes it's just really easy for your opponent to out it. But it does come in handy when you need to out something in this method. And then I have this in because I opened it. You will never fucking play this card. I actually tried before pushing with this version, and I was still winning games with a version that like could summon this, but at 0 points did I ever get to summon this card. Let alone I didn't even get to play the card before this card. And even if you do get this card out, it just like it dies to removal. Like there's a whole lot that this card doesn't do, and I don't think it even wins right away. It's the start of the next turn after it was summoned. Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like I tried to play this in a casual game, and then like this was an issue. So like in an actual game, I've never played it, and like it's probably never gonna do you any good. So you can just like replace that with anything else you want. All in all, good deck. We can go take a look at a replay real quick, and then I'll show some sample hands. Shoot. Where's the replay that I saved? It's over here. My profile. Feel free to follow me. But you don't have to. There's nothing to see here. Play replay? Yeah, cool. Alright. I like this replay because it's a limiter removal replay. So this is the only one that I saved, though. So this is a game where we don't open field spell, which would otherwise be an auto win. Also, our opponent makes us go first, which is not ideal. We play the Desires. We pass into a hard... Hold on, I'm going too fast. Into a hard Maxx C, which means he just passes back to us. I set a droplet and then pass back. He's playing Blue Eyes, which explains the slow, dirty-ass game. Plays an alternative, swings in. I'm not going to droplet it for just the 3k damage. We set the Imperm, pass, shotgun the other Maxx C, just trying to bide as much time as we can to help draw into the field spell, of which we play a good number of copies of. If he summons more monsters, we're probably going to get it, or maybe like our Battle Fader-esque card to keep us alive. We have the droplet to maybe keep us alive. I'm going to slow down here because things get a little interesting as the game actually begins here on turn 7. A very unusual game, since normally it would be your opponent summons a board like this, you tribute with a kaiju, field spell it if you have one, and then just run them down. So we draw into a copy of Numeron Wall here, but we can't use it because we have cards on our field. So we have to impermanence this, and then we have to chain the droplet. We can't cast these one at a time, because casting these one at a time and letting them resolve will render this card's effects already negated, at which point you cannot attempt to negate its effects again, so you can get stuck with cards on field that way. We also have to flip the impermanence first if we're going to play both of them, so that we can send the impermanence to the grave off of droplet and not cost ourselves extra cards. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use both abilities here. And then we're going to kaiju it. Then we're going to Numeron Wall as our field is empty. He's going to Maxx C. It doesn't matter. Always play into the Maxx C if you can kill your opponent in this deck. The worst thing they can draw on you is an Ash against a Pathfinder, but if you're Pathfindering first, that shouldn't happen. There's not really a lot of things that can stop you. Maybe like in the mirror match. Go ahead and summon the Kaiju too, just for extra BM. Doesn't really matter. At this point, I know I've got game, because this is inherently the normal combo where you 4k and then you 8k, but we have a limiter, so instead we're going to hit him for a fat 16k, and this guy is playing Blue Eyes, so he has nothing. I quite like this replay, of course, but it's a little overkill. Most games will not actually be like that, so I probably should have selected another one, but, you know, it is what it is. We can just go take a look at some hands here real quick. Pay no heed to my other suspects. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and sample hands real quick. And so just quickly looking at this first hand, we'll draw a card since we are presuming we go second, but it doesn't matter. We have 3 hand traps on our opening hand, a kaiju to kaiju their monster, and a network. So in a situation where they summon a monster, we have probably killed our opponent. We reroll again. We again have drawn a kaiju and a field spell with a couple hand traps. Shotgun the Maxx C, make them do as little as possible. Hopefully set a monster. This is usually ideal. If you're a little worried they won't play something, I guess you can hold the Maxx C. Personally, I just like shotgunning it. I don't really mind. We've drawn a Numeron Calling. These things in your hand is okay. If you activate the field spell, and then you activate the effect of the field spell on the field, and then they chain pop it, you are fucked for the turn. If you happen to have the field spell on field, hard cast the spell, and the spell is like activation negated, or if they like pop the field spell or something, you're like usually still good to go, either just as is, or if you have a second copy of field spell in hand. I digress. This is lethal. We draw a card for our turn. We have a reboot. This is a gross starting hand. Again, we've drawn field spell. We don't have a kaiju on this one, so we have an imperm to slow our opponent down and a removal for lots of damage, even if they don't play anything. We have a second copy of Pathfinder, but obviously can't use 2 in the same turn. So if they have like a dry trump board or something, we would actually lose this game. Otherwise, we would kill them. With this hand, obviously, we have a Maxx C that we would like to dump on our opponent, hopefully draw into field spell. If we don't, we can 1-for-1 into our field spell, and if assuming that doesn't get ashed, we do have the reboot to protect from traps. We have a kaiju, we can OTK our opponent, and our top deck is irrelevant, not helpful to our hand. I think at this point I've made my point, but here we have an actual hard brick hand. We have 2 cards to slow our opponent down, we have a Desires, and we've drawn our field spell. And then if we Pot of Desires for 2 more cards, we've drawn our field spell. Again, there's enough copies in this deck of the field spell or cards to search it that for 9 games out of 10, yeah, pulling number out of my ass. But again, 14 win streak, it can't be that bad. You should have the field spell. Again, here we have the field spell. We can just draw until we have a hand where we don't have the field spell going second. We have many copies of the field spell. Oh, okay, I right click. It's fine. I've made my point. This is a good deck. I recommend that you try this deck. Cool. Yeah, alright, have a good one.